Kia ora and welcome to Ancient Spirits Beacon. I'm Hiona, and blessing our sacred screen today, I have with me Paora Andrews. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Paora, you're a traditional practitioner. Can you define in your own words what that practice involves?
It's working with spirit. It's a combination of traditional and mainstream thought. I was initially educated in Australia in anatomy and physiology, psychotherapy, Chinese massage and philosophy, a deep tissue muscle therapy. But it wasn't until I actually came home and landed on my whenua, my papakainga, my tūranga waiwai, that the wairua component actually became a part of it as well. And I think that that's really where it all starts, is when you come back to the beginning, to where it all began, and you make connection with your whenua, your whakapapa, and your whānau. Those three components are very important to start the ball rolling on a personal level. And so that I did. I came back home. Then I realized that I actually started linking into my childhood. And I was raised in Mangamuka by all the old people, the Otene clan. We were taught how to do the rongoa, because they went out there and they got the rongoa if we got sick and helped fix us up. They also did what is very interesting, and it sits very strongly in my mind's eye, is that every once in a while, maybe one or two, every 2 months, they would all go into the marae, into the whare tupuna. And they would close the door, lock the door, and all of our karani were either Mormon, Ratana, Roman Catholic, or Presbyterian Methodist. But for 2 days they were Māori. And so they would shut the world out, and they would do their whakapapa, which was chanted in those days. They would do their motete pao. And they dragged a few of us young kids in there, even though we weren't taught what they were doing, or we had no idea what they were doing. We were dragged in there, and we had to kind of just lie there, and I suppose it was the first form of subliminal imprinting, yeah. And I remember looking up at the core 5-5 patterns, wondering, what am I doing here? And looking over at the tiko and all that sort of thing, and thinking, I want to be outside with all the other kids, yeah. There were a couple of other children there as well too, I remember. And now, 50 or 60 years later, we're all sitting there at the marae talking about it and discovering why that was. And it was like the kohanga reo for the wairua students. See what I'm saying? So as we got older, of course, the denial jumped in, and we all took off overseas to get as far away from it as we possibly could. And it wasn't until later on, when we started hitting our 50s, that we realized that there was more to life than making money, acquiring material things, and entertaining ourselves. So just before I turned 50, I returned home. Yeah.
And was it that calling back to your tūranga waiwai where you were able to rediscover all the teachings that you had when you were a child?
Yeah, well, an interesting thing was is that during the training that I did overseas, it actually fired my learning abilities. Yeah, and I am an Aquarian, so I like things new. I like things that are outrageous. I like things that are exciting, and so I've always been a reader. So I've always looked to find the unusual, and I've always studied. So I think going back to the beginning was a crucial aspect for me to rediscover what I'd forgotten.
And what did you rediscover?
I rediscovered that things have never changed. I thought that things would change, but they actually in their status quo was their beauty of security and I was able to slip back into where I left off. And it was the same with old schoolmates whom I hadn't seen for 45 years. We slipped back into the same patterns that we left when we were children. And that's how I felt with the wairua of the marae, of the whenua, of the whānau, of the whakapapa. And the whakapapa was the secret. Learning my whakapapa on my mother's side, which I never knew because I wasn't raised by that whānau, allowed me to discover who I really was. And I discovered my connections to Tainui, very strong connection to Tainui, through my Maioha line. The Maiohas, Pātara Tutuhi and Honana, their father was Paratene Te Maioha, and his brother was Piri Te Maioha, who was my tupuna. So you see how closely linked they are. And they are first cousins to Tāwhiao. So all of a sudden, I'm down in Tainui, linked very closely to Tūranga Waiwai, Wāhi Marae in Huntly, Raglan, Whaingaroa, Ngāti Maniapoto, and then on my father's side, the Otene side, I linked to Tainui, Ngāti Mahuta. So I have very strong links to Tainui.
And your whakapapa, do you come from a line of healers? I mean, how does the traditional practices, how does that fit into your whakapapa? And what did it bring out in you, in your own gifts?
Well, the last tohunga in my father's side that I'm very consciously aware of, his name was Hohepa Otene Pura. He signed the treaty back in 1840. He probably signed the Declaration of Independence in 1835 too. But on his headstone, he pretty much says that when he signed the treaty in 1840, he became a servant to the White Queen. I don't know what that's worth, but anyway, it shows that he moved from the dark to the light. And so all of his uri, all of his descendants, have the gift. Now, that what made that very interesting is that from a DNA perspective, I can probably name 4 chiefly lines that I come down from, okay, including the Tainui lines. So the indication is that all of those chiefly lines were matakite. That's what I've discovered. So all those chiefly lines of matakite, I have it naturally in me, even though I am a male as opposed to a female. So all of my cousins on both sides, my father and mother's side, have gifts in the Wairua. So why aren't they using them? Yeah? So it makes me think, and then I've approached all my cousins and nieces and said, tell me your story. What's holding you up? Or what's holding you back?
Right, so you're talking about that from coming from the dark into the light. You're in the light now, but you can still see that the kids that you grew up with, they still haven't made that transition themselves. What's happening there?
Not so much they haven't made the transition, they haven't accepted that part of themselves, that gift. You know, they were raised in the light. The DNA is raised in the light. But because they had to go out and get a job, to buy a house, to feed their whānau, this sort of work has kind of like slipped to one side. But if you look at Māori society in general anyway, everyone had a role. Not everyone was a tohunga. Not everyone was a healer. You know, we all had our roles to play. And I think that applies today as well, is that there are some that are capable of maintaining wairua, there are some that are capable of maintaining their hinengaro, and there are some that are capable of being practical, hands-on people. And so we all have our roles. It just all depends on what's our strength.
And what are your strengths?
Well, the whole three. The whole three. I'm an intellect from just the nature of who I am. I'm a healer from the nature of who I am. And I love to work with my hands because that's who I am. So I think you've got to be an all-rounder to be effective in any field. But when you're working with people's health, people's spiritual health as well as physical health, you have to be an all-rounder, because there's going to be someone that's going to come along that's going to throw an 8-ball and you're going to go, what the hell was that? And you're going to be able to respond, not react, but respond in a proactive way to recover that and maintain that status quo. And it's about maintaining status quo. So the more knowledge one has of everything, the better it is for them to deal with the unexpected. And I love the unexpected.
Can you give us an example of an unexpected situation or healing situation that you've been in?
Well, every day. I'm doing a reading today, and this woman starts deep breathing, moaning beside me, and I'm writing, and I'm looking this like, what are you doing? But I know that she is making connection to her marae kura, her kaitiaki, okay? And it's this process that there are different ways of transitioning into your communication with spirit. And some do it just by going, and some go, okay? So there are different ways. Now, when she started huffing and puffing, I thought, okay. And then there was this voice that was not hers that greeted me in the reo. And normally I would kind of like perk my head up and go, look very hard. But because I had sort of been forewarned that she was the channeler, okay, for particular wairua, it didn't really surprise me as much as if I hadn't been warned. It was still unexpected. Yeah. So when she greeted me in Māori, I greeted her back. And then she was fine. Yeah? And I kept on, because I was writing down the reading. I write everything down so that people can go away and go, oh, yes, I remember him saying that. Yeah. So in this way, I was able to appease the kaitiaki of that woman. And then she was fine. Only because I was actually giving insights that were new to the person being read, that the kaitiaki was trying to figure out whether I was pono tika. Yeah? And if you're not, I tell you, then you'll get a surprise.
Right.
I also had someone else yesterday who had a reading, and I said something which I thought was, pretty standard, and she burst into tears. And it's like, what did I say? But there you go. It hit a button in her wairua that, and she said to me later on, what you said actually triggered a memory of my father who passed away. Da 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 da. And it was a wonderful feeling, but that was the memory that triggered that. You see. So I have learnt to talk with spirit. I think sometimes if we manipulate things in our minds before we say them, we actually don't come out the right way.
Right.
Okay. I mean that's an interesting one because I know that.
Are you talking about intentions? Yeah, and what your intention is, saying something, it's not necessarily what you're thinking.
Yeah, and like at the moment, I'm thinking about all these experiences while I'm talking to you. So it's trying to actually get it so that I can put it into words because, we don't have a piece of paper saying, oh, now say this.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing a reading, I don't actually have to think about anything because it's being channeled.
As a traditional practitioner, what methods do you use?
Well, that's an interesting question because I have followed particular patterns like numerology. Okay, I was taught by Dr. David Phillips, who is an author, macrobiologist, physicist. He's now gone, but I was his student over in Sydney in 1985. He piqued my interest in numerology, and I then had to do my own personal study because he passed away. And it's like anything else; it's an ongoing process. So I learned how to discover karmic lessons. Let's say, for instance, it wasn't in his books. He didn't teach us, and I thought, well, the karmic lessons are very important. I discovered that by looking at a person's chart, that the numbers that aren't in his birth date or her birth date are the karmic lessons. Have to be. Yeah. So I don't actually dwell on them, though. It's not unless someone asks me, do I have a karmic lesson? Or do I have a karmic lesson? I'll go, yep, you do. And I'm not sure why I don't zero in on that because I know for people it's important, but I think they've got enough to worry about without having to find that out, unless they're interested, yeah? And then, of course, I was trained as a deep tissue muscle therapist. I also worked with Chinese massage and acupressure and philosophy, and also I dabbled, I suppose is the best term, because I didn't actually follow through with the psychotherapy. But the teacher that I had for that was a doctor of psychotherapy at New South Wales University, and he was the most amazing guy. I've had some amazing teachers, absolutely amazing. And he eventually said, during the course of that that particular class, we had a one-on-one. And he was an anthropologist as well. So when we had the one-on-one, he said to me, "You're fascinating." He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a Māori from New Zealand." He said, "Have you been there long?" I said, Me personally, or Māori?" He said, "You. Have you lived in New Zealand long?" I said, "We've been there for over 1,000 years." He said, "You're kidding me." See, so for some reason or another, we were hidden from an anthropologist. Hello. Then I proceeded to tell him in a very short order what our beliefs were, tikanga-wise. He said, "Well, you don't really need to stay in the class anymore." He said, "Because from the answers that you give, I don't need to teach you anything." I went, "But I want to stay." He says, No, I believe that you need to move on." So anyway, I moved on. And I still needed something though to ground me. And so that's when I found the numerologist. And by studying numerology, I was then able to see and map, myself and the people around me. So I thought, well, the easiest way for me to learn is to take all my friends' birth dates and do their charts, and then I can see whether it works or not. Well, surprise, surprise. 80% of them weren't even close to their destiny. So I questioned Dr. Phillips on that. He said, "It's funny." He said, "Most people go off their destiny path through different misfortunes, different traumas that get in the way, and all of a sudden they have to adapt to survive or to get on with life." He says, so it's really not till later on in life or until someone comes along like us who reminds them where they're supposed to be that they do actually get back on the path. So the wonderful thing about being home and being amongst our people is that they are open to being placed on the path, or they are open to learning something new, or to rediscovering who they really are. Yeah, and I'm sweet for being there to tell them.
Right. And numerology helps you to help them with their life path or realign them with their life path.
Yeah, also to rediscover their gifts, because it comes through in the chart, their gifts. Like this woman today, it reaffirmed for me that she was matakite, inside and out. I actually said a couple of things to her, and she kind of like burst out into song, because she says, "I'm so glad that you have said that, because I needed a confirmation from someone I didn't know who didn't know me, that I am over this. I'm over what I'm doing. I need to step into my own power, and I need to express my own truth, no one else's." She'd been caught up in the system, you see. Yeah. And she was wondering when the time was right. I said, well, the time is when you have your next birthday. You need to step into your own power. See? That's all she needed. So the die has been set. The process will proceed accordingly. And I'm part of the catalyst for that, which I'm happy for her, because when we are trained or educated in the system, it doesn't really tell us about who we are. It doesn't really help us to discover or train or develop our God-given gifts. Yeah. So what needs to happen, I suppose, is that we need to have a signpost saying, if you want to know your true path, or if you want to know your true gifts, come here. We'll show you. We'll tell you. Because a lot of people actually fumble around in the ether trying to figure out Is this where I'm going? Is this what I have to do? I don't know. No one's telling me. Just because no one knows. But I do. And I know other people that do too. And we're not interested in being recognized for it. We're interested in
activating.
helping as many of our people as we can. And I'm talking Pākehā, Chinese, Samoa, Pacifica, to activate their gifts, and so they can stand in their own power and speak their own truth.
You also work with 0 point energy. Can you tell us a little bit more about 0 point energy?
Well, circa 1928, Albert Einstein, along with two Russian scientists, discovered this subatomic energy beneath the atom. They discovered that it was self-perpetuating, self-energizing, and that they could use it to create a bomb, the H-bomb. But at the other end of the scale too, someone discovered that you could actually capture it into something and use it for healing purposes. So at the time that on my birthday, 2010, I met an old mate of mine that I used to know over in Australia, and she talked about 0 point energy, and she gave me a look at one of these. Okay, this is a titanium wand. Okay, it looks like a pen, but there's nothing at the bottom. Titanium is an excellent carrier of energy. It doesn't attract any radiation, but it projects immense energy that's captured in there. By using this on the body, whatever is captured within the circle is transmuted into light. Okay? So if, say, you had a pain somewhere, I would use it in this fashion. So as you can see, I've got this nice little attachment to it there. And why I did that was so that I could create a pendulum effect. And so instead of using a crystal, I actually use this on my hand to activate the chakra in my hand. You see? And so this is what's happening. So if I were to place this on any part of the body, that will be used to not so much remove, but to transmute the energy, because we're all made up of molecules. And if we get down to the molecular level, it doesn't matter whether you're dense, whether you're thick, whether you're thin, whether you're black, white, it's all the same. And to this energy here, it's all the same. So by using this device, I can remove a lot of, like, depression. I removed 2 lots of depression with this yesterday. And that's after working on the workshop. And I must admit that, like I said to the people that came to the workshop, you're not going to connect straight away with your little crystal that you were given. You need to talk to it. You need to sleep with it. You need to connect. Okay? And so the person whom she was working with didn't actually do anything effective. But the whole purpose of doing this workshop was to show them another way. Now, they may go out and they may get another crystal that's more to their liking. That doesn't matter. So what I did was I lifted the korowai, or the blanket of depression, off this woman by using this. And this is designed to transmute the light. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what the 2000 vibration is all about. The light.
Tell us more about the 2000 vibration.
When we moved from the 1900 into the 2000 vibration, we moved from the masculine principle into the feminine principle. So now it's all about the goddess energy. Dr. Rose Pere enacted a ceremony down in Waikare Moana in 2013, I believe, that brought the goddess energy from Egypt to Aotearoa for the new millennium. So Aotearoa carries that. And I'm not suggesting that the goddess energy is not over in Egypt too. But what it does is that it reaffirms that we are the new stepping stone for the Māori Kura energy, the goddess energy. For people that are wanting to know that, Google it.
Well, before we wrap up, do you have any messages that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah. Go down to your local awa, find yourself a kohatu, and treat it like your whānau, treat it like your tuakana, treat it like your mātamua. It's important that you understand the truth of the universe through that rock, through that kohatu. I think when we get caught up in the bling bling or the crystals, we tend to forget the reality, the truth of where we come from. We come from her, we come from Papa, we go back to Papa. And that kohatu is our brother or our sister, and we need to understand that. So it's something simple, okay? I have the greatest respect for nature, and I think that the wonderful thing about being in Aotearoa is that it doesn't matter who we are. We have that intrinsically built into our DNA. We just need to link back into it. Kia ora.
Well, thank you for coming to talk with me. It's been a lovely kōrero today. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to sign off by saying, no matter where you are, don't forget that love is our universal language. Thank you. Ka kite. Aroha nui.